Have you ever stood beneath a sky so clear and brilliant that you could trace every constellation with your fingertips? Imagine doing so along the Nile River thousands of years ago, where the desert air was so pure that the stars didn't just twinkle, they blazed. The ancient Egyptians didn't just look up at the night sky, they saw it as a living, breathing map of their gods, their myths, and their very understanding of existence. This was no simple pastime, it was a sophisticated blend of science, spirituality, and storytelling that guided everything from the timing of the harvest to the construction of their grandest monuments. And it's this extraordinary system, Egyptian star lore, that we're about to explore together. In a world without artificial light or digital distractions, the night sky was their constant companion, their celestial clock, and their most sacred scripture. They didn't merely observe the stars, they named them, worshipped them, and wove them into the very fabric of their culture. From the predictable rise of Sirius heralding the annual flood to the eternal journey of the sun god Ra, the Egyptians saw the cosmos not as random points of light, but as a grand, interconnected narrative, one that reflected their beliefs, their fears, and their deepest hopes. This was astronomy intertwined with mythology, a celestial dance that shaped their calendars, their architecture, and even their understanding of the afterlife. So what can we learn from their vision of the heavens? How did they use the stars to navigate both the physical and spiritual worlds? And why does their star lore still capture our imagination millennia later? In this journey, we'll uncover how the ancient Egyptians mapped the sky, decoded the movements of planets and constellations, and created a legacy that continues to inspire wonder. You're about to step into a world where science and myth were inseparable, where every star had a story, and every story pointed toward something greater. To truly grasp their celestial worldview, we must first shed our modern perspective. We see a universe of empty space and distant balls of gas, but the Egyptians saw a cosmos brimming with life and intention. Their sky was not a void but a divine, tangible entity. At the heart of this belief was the goddess Nut, a deity whose very form was the heavens. Picture her not as a distant figure in the stars, but as the sky itself, a graceful, powerful woman arched over the earth, her body adorned with glittering stars, her fingertips and toes touching the four corners of the world. She was the ceiling of their reality, both beautiful and protective. This was a universe of daily cycles and celestial rebirth. Each evening, they believed the sun god Ra would be swallowed by Nut, journeying through her starry body throughout the night. This wasn't a time of darkness and fear, but of renewal. Within her, Ra would travel from west to east, gathering strength and wisdom before being born anew from her mouth at dawn. Every sunrise was a divine birth, a miracle repeated each morning, explaining the perpetual cycle of day and night not through science, but through profound mythology. The stars themselves were not static, they were seen as lesser deities or blessed souls sailing across Nut's torso in their own celestial boats, accompanying the sun on his eternal voyage. This worldview is seamlessly integrated into their daily life and their most sacred spaces. The ceilings of royal tombs and temples were often painted a deep blue and dotted with golden stars, literally placing the deceased or the worshipper beneath the body of Nut. This was more than art, it was a spiritual map. To be buried under her image was to be placed directly within the cycle of rebirth, ensuring one's own soul could join the eternal journey across the heavens. Their entire understanding of time, from the daily journey of the sun to the annual movements of constellations, was framed by this story of a goddess giving birth to the day and welcoming the night, making the cosmos a familiar, familial, and deeply sacred place. But to translate this grand celestial mythology into daily practice, the ancient Egyptians developed one of history's most sophisticated and practical systems of astronomy. Theirs was not a sky of random patterns, but a highly organized, predictable clockwork of stars. They mapped the heavens into constellations vastly different from the Greek and Roman ones we recognize today. There was no Orion the hunter as we know him. Instead, they saw Sa, a divine incarnation of Osiris, the god of the afterlife. The great bull we call Taurus was to them the foreleg of a celestial bull, severed in a mythic battle and placed in the sky for protection. This was a sky populated by their gods and their myths, a direct reflection of their unique worldview. Central to their timekeeping were the Decans, a system so ingenious it reveals their deep understanding of the cosmos. Imagine dividing the band of sky visible from Egypt into 36 small, distinct star groups. These are the Decans. The brilliance of this system lay in their observation that a new decan would rise just before the sun, becoming visible on the eastern horizon at dawn, approximately every 10 days. This sequential rising, this celestial conveyor belt of stars, provided them with an incredibly accurate star clock, by tracking which decan was heliacally rising, meaning it appeared for just a brief moment before being washed out by the sun's light. They could mark the passing of 10-day intervals, effectively dividing their year into 36 weeks of 10 days each. This was far more than just a calendar for farmers, though it undoubtedly dictated the timing of planting and harvesting. The decanal clock was woven into the very fabric of their religion and statecraft. Each decan was associated with a specific deity or divine principle, and its rising marked a time for particular rituals, offerings, and ceremonies. Priests would use this knowledge to maintain the precise timing of temple rites, ensuring their actions were in perfect harmony with the cosmos. The movement of these star groups also divided the night into 12 equal hours, though the length of these hours would change with the seasons. This complex, starlit timekeeping allowed them to schedule nocturnal religious celebrations with an accuracy that seems remarkable even today. Their entire conception of time, from the hourly changes of the night watch to the annual inundation of the Nile, signaled by the rise of Sirius, was governed by this meticulous observation of the stars, proving their celestial lore was both a spiritual guide and the world's first precise astronomical almanac. Yet for all the meticulous precision of their decanal clock, the ancient Egyptians held an even deeper reverence for a special group of stars that defied the very concept of cycles and time itself. These were the circumpolar stars, the ones that, from their latitude, never dipped below the horizon. They didn't rise and set like the others, they simply wheeled endlessly around the celestial pole in a grand, undying dance. They called these the Ikhimu Sek, a name that translates powerfully to the Imperishable Ones, and they saw in their eternal presence the ultimate promise of immortality. While other stars were born from the mouth of Nut at dawn and were swallowed by her each evening, these constant sentinels were considered exempt from this cycle of death and rebirth. They existed outside of it, untouched by decay or change, forever fixed in their glory. This made them the celestial embodiment of eternity, and it's no surprise that the Egyptians linked them directly to the most sought-after prize in their culture, an eternal existence in the afterlife. They weren't just stars, they were divine anchors in the cosmos, the unwavering, undying souls of those who had achieved the ultimate state of blessedness. This profound belief became central to the journey of the pharaoh's soul. When a king died, his ultimate destination wasn't just to dwell with Osiris in the underworld, but to take his place among these imperishable ones. The pyramid texts, some of the oldest religious writings in the world, are filled with spells and incantations designed to ensure the deceased pharaoh's successful ascension. They don't just hope he reaches the heavens, they instruct him on how to join this specific, unchanging crew of stars. One spell explicitly says, "The king is a star brilliant and far-traveling, the king appears as a star." This wasn't poetic metaphor, it was a literal, ritualized roadmap to eternity. the imagery carved and painted within the sacred confines of royal tombs makes this connection utterly clear. On the ceilings of many burial chambers, you'll find two distinct sets of star patterns. There are the typical 5-pointed stars representing the decanal stars that rise and set, the mortal stars subject to the cycle. And then, often surrounding the figure of the goddess Nut herself, you'll find a separate, distinct group of stars. These are depicted not as 5-pointed, but as a series of small circles or dots, a deliberate artistic choice to set the imperishable ones apart visually, marking them as a different, more exalted class of celestial being. This wasn't an abstract hope, it was a navigational guide for the soul. The pharaoh's spirit, released from his body, was believed to use these never-setting stars as a fixed reference point to orient himself on his perilous journey through the Juat, the underworld. By sailing his celestial boat toward their unchanging light, he could avoid the dangers and demons of the night and secure his place in their eternal company. In a culture that measured time in relentless, precise cycles, the imperishable ones represented the ultimate escape from that very cycle, a state of perfect, unchanging being that every Egyptian, but especially their divine king, aspired to join. If the circumpolar stars represented a serene, unchanging eternity, then the daily voyage of the sun embodied the opposite, a dramatic, perilous, and cyclical struggle that defined the very rhythm of life. At the center of this cosmic drama was the sun god Ra, and his vehicle was as vital as the journey itself, the magnificent Mesektet, the solar barque. This was no ordinary boat. It was a divine vessel, a floating palace and a fortified warship, designed to carry the sun itself across the dome of the sky and through the terrifying depths of the underworld each night. His journey across the daytime sky was one of glorious revelation. The Egyptians saw the sun not as a burning ball of gas, but as the visible manifestation of Ra's power and presence. As he sailed his day barque across the body of the goddess Nut, his light nourished the earth, allowing crops to grow, keeping chaos at bay, and granting life to every living creature. This daily trance, it was a period of order and stability, of Ma'at, the fundamental principle of truth and balance, holding sway over the world. But as the sun began to descend in the west, a profound transformation was underway. Ra was not setting, he was transitioning. The day barque reached the western horizon and metamorphosed into the night barque, prepared for the far more dangerous and invisible leg of its eternal journey. This was the moment the sun entered the Juat, the Egyptian underworld. For the next 12 hours of night, Ra would not simply rest. He would embark on a fraught and heroic voyage through a treacherous realm filled with demons, lakes of fire, and ghostly gatekeepers. The entire purpose of this nocturnal passage was one of regeneration. The intense light and energy Ra expended during the day had to be replenished, and this could only happen through this trial by night. But the greatest threat to this cycle, and indeed to all of creation, was the serpent Apophis, or Apep. Apophis was the ultimate embodiment of Isfet chaos, disorder, and nothingness. He was a creature of pure malice, not to be worshipped but to be vanquished. Each and every night, as Ra's barque sailed through the 12th and deepest hour of the Juat, Apophis would lie in wait, coiled and ready to strike. His goal was not to rule but to uncreate. He sought to devour Ra, to swallow the sun whole and plunge the cosmos into eternal, irreversible darkness. The myth tells of a colossal battle that erupted nightly around the barque. Ra, often assisted by a crew of other deities like Seth, the god of violence and storms, and the protective eye of Ra herself, would fight the serpent with spears, knives, and divine incantations. This was not a battle with a foregone conclusion. The Egyptians believed the outcome was never certain. Every sunrise was a victory, a testament to Ra's renewed power and the collective effort of the gods who defended the barque. When the sun finally emerged victorious from the eastern horizon, It wasn't just the start of a new day, it was the rebirth of the sun god himself, emerging from the womb of Nut, revitalized and triumphant once more over the forces of chaos. This explained the dawn, the most hopeful moment of the day, as a divine miracle repeated since the beginning of time. This myth was far more than a story, it was a cosmological engine that drove Egyptian ritual and philosophy. Priests in temples conducted ceremonies specifically designed to aid Ra in his fight, reciting spells from the books of overthrowing Apophis to magically paralyze the serpent and ensure the sun's safe return. For the average person, the reliable return of the sun each morning was proof that Maat was upheld and their world was secure. The entire concept of life, death, and rebirth, for the land, the king, and every individual was mirrored in this endless, courageous journey of the sun through the sky, through the underworld, and back again. Yet amidst this grand celestial drama of eternal stars and nightly battles, one single point of light held a power so direct and tangible that it dictated the rhythm of life for the entire civilization. That star was Sopdet, known to us as Sirius, the brightest beacon in the night sky. Its appearance was not just an astronomical event, it was the key that unlocked the floodgates of the Nile, the herald of the new year, and a divine signal that resonated through every layer of Egyptian society. While the circumpolar stars promised eternity and the sun's journey represented cosmic order, Sirius delivered a message of immediate, life-sustaining renewal. The Egyptians observed a precise and wondrous phenomenon each year. For a period of about 70 days, Sirius would vanish completely from the night sky, lost in the overwhelming glare of the sun. Then, one morning in what we would call mid-July, just before dawn, it would make its triumphant return. For a fleeting moment, a brilliant spark would glitter just above the eastern horizon before fading from view as the sun rose. This first appearance, known as its heliacal rising, was the event they waited for with bated breath. It signaled that the inundation was coming. The lifeblood of their civilization, the Nile's annual flood, would soon begin its journey north, ready to deposit the rich, black silt that would fertilize their fields and ensure another year of abundance. This celestial timing was so impeccably reliable that the Egyptians built their entire calendar around it. Their new year, called Wepet Renpet, which translates beautifully to the opening of the year, commenced not with a solstice or a political decree, but with this singular astral event. The star's return marked the beginning of the season of Akhit, the inundation, which was the first of their 3 seasons. This made the Egyptian calendar one of the only in the ancient world to be based on a stellar rather than a lunar or simple solar cycle. The priests who tracked Sopdet's movements were therefore among the most vital officials in the kingdom, for their observations directly governed the agricultural and economic fate of the entire nation. But as with all things in their world, this astronomical event was inseparable from divinity. Sopdet was not merely a star, she was a goddess, intimately linked with the most powerful maternal figure in their pantheon, Isis. The myth weaves a poignant connection. Osiris, the god of the afterlife and Isis's husband, was murdered and dismembered by his brother Seth. Isis, in her profound grief, embarked on a long, desperate search to gather his scattered parts and magically restore him to life long enough to conceive their son, Horus. The 70 days of Sirius's invisibility were seen as a reflection of the 70 days used in the mummification process, a period of death and preparation for rebirth. Just as Osiris was revived, the star's reappearance symbolized Isis's triumphant success and the rebirth of her husband's legacy in their son. Therefore, the heliacal rising of Sirius was celebrated as the moment Isis's tears of mourning for Osiris caused the Nile to overflow its banks, bringing life from death and fertility from sorrow. The star Sopdet was often depicted as a graceful woman with a 5-pointed star resting directly on her head, and she was frequently shown accompanying Isis in religious art. a celestial companion to the earthly goddess. This fusion of astronomy and mythology provided a complete and satisfying explanation for their world. The star caused the flood, which was the tears of a goddess, which led to the fertility of the land, which sustained the people. It was a perfect, interconnected cycle of grief, love, and renewal written in the stars and felt in the muddy, life-giving waters of the river itself. While the Sun and Sirius played their roles in the cycles of life and rebirth, another constellation served as the very anchor of the afterlife, a celestial king eternally fixed in the heavens. This was Sa, the soul of Osiris, a pattern of stars we recognize today as Orion, but the ancient Egyptians saw far more than a hunter's belt and sword. They saw the resurrected god of the underworld, a divine pharaoh whose journey from death to eternal rule was mirrored in the slow, majestic drift of this constellation across the night sky. To understand their vision, we must look at Orion not as a static image but through the lens of their mythology. The story of Osiris is one of betrayal, murder, and miraculous revival. Killed by his brother Seth, his body was scattered across Egypt. Through the powerful magic and unwavering devotion of his wife Isis, his body was recovered and reassembled, allowing him to be resurrected not as a god of the living world, but as the righteous and eternal ruler of the dead. Sa represents Osiris in this glorious, resurrected state. He is not a god of death in a grim sense, but a sovereign of eternity, offering the promise of renewed life to all who pass just judgments in the hall of the afterlife. This celestial identity was profoundly physical, reflected in the very architecture of death. The pyramids of Giza present one of the most compelling pieces of evidence for this belief. The three great pyramids of Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure are arranged on the Giza Plateau in a way that seems to deliberately mirror the three stars of Orion's belt. This is no casual resemblance. The layout matches the stars' relative positions and even their slight skew from a perfect alignment, with the smallest of the three pyramids offset just like the dimmest star in the belt. The Milky Way, which the Egyptians saw as their celestial Nile, flows near Orion in the sky, just as the actual Nile flows beside the Giza necropolis. The pyramid complex was not just a tomb, it was a machine for resurrection, a permanent, earthly echo of the celestial Duat, designed to project the pharaoh's soul directly into the eternal company of Sa. The relationship between Sa and Sopdet, Orion and Sirius, deepened this cosmic symbolism. In the sky, Orion appears to rise just before Sirius, as if he is heralding her arrival. This astronomical dance was interpreted through myth. Just as the resurrected Osiris was the consort of the goddess Isis on earth, his celestial form, Sa, was the eternal companion to the stellar goddess Sopdet. Their intertwined journey across the heavens, Sa rising first, followed by his divine wife, visually reinforced their sacred partnership. This mirrored the essential balance of male and female principles central to Egyptian creation myths, a duality of king and queen, order and fertility, playing out on a grand, cosmic scale for all eternity. This connection was a cornerstone of the pharaoh's own quest for immortality. A king's ultimate goal was to become an Ak, a transfigured, effective spirit that could travel with the gods. By aligning his burial place with Sa, he was directly tethering his soul to the constellation of the resurrected god. Funerary texts explicitly spell out this intention, with spells designed to transform the deceased into a star at the front of Sa. The pyramid was a launch pad, and its alignment was the targeting mechanism, ensuring the king's spirit would not get lost in the vastness of the Duat, but would sail directly to his place in the celestial court of Osiris, to live forever among the imperishable stars. While Sa and Sopdet told stories of resurrection and renewal, another constellation, far more familiar to our modern eyes, served a deeply practical purpose in the daily life of ancient Egypt. Look up at the northern sky today and you'll easily find the Big Dipper, but cast your mind back millennia and you would have seen something entirely different, the Meskhetiyu, the bull's thigh. This was not merely a collection of stars, it was a powerful divine symbol and, perhaps more importantly, one of the world's most ingenious and reliable celestial clocks. The name itself offers a glimpse into their worldview. The Meskhetiyu, or the foreleg of the bull, was seen as the severed limb of a celestial bovine, a motif rooted in a powerful myth. The story tells of a great and chaotic bull, a manifestation of the god Seth, the deity of storms, violence, and the untamed desert. In an epic battle to restore order, the hero god Horus fought and defeated this beast, hacking off its foreleg. This limb, representing the conquered forces of chaos, was then cast into the northern sky by the gods, where it was fixed for all eternity as a trophy of Maat's victory over Isfet. Its very presence in the heavens was a constant reminder that order had been imposed upon chaos, but beyond its mythical origins, the bull's thigh held immense practical value due to its unique circumpolar nature. From the vantage point of Egypt, this constellation never set below the horizon. It was one of the Imperishable Ones, but unlike the others that simply wheeled silently, the Meskhetiyu did so with a precise, measurable regularity. The ancient Egyptian astronomers observed that its handle, the three stars we see as the Dipper's tail, appeared to rotate around the northern celestial pole in a counterclockwise direction, completing one full revolution every 24 hours. This predictable motion became the basis for their system of telling time at night. They divided the night into 12 hours, and by observing the orientation of the bull's thigh, they could determine which hour was passing. Imagine a priest or a night watchman gazing north. He would have memorized key positions of the constellation corresponding to specific hours. When the handle pointed directly down, it might signify the first hour of night. As it rotated to a horizontal position, it marked the middle of the night. When it pointed directly upward, dawn was approaching. This wasn't a vague estimation, it was a precise tool, with the slow, graceful sweep of the stars acting as the hour hand on a vast, cosmic clock face centered on the North Star. This method of timekeeping was so critical that it was immortalized in their art and their most sacred rituals. A series of diagrams known as star clocks were painted inside the lids of coffins and on the ceilings of tombs during the Middle Kingdom. These charts often featured a seated human figure, surrounded by a grid of 36 decans and, crucially, a list of the night hours with instructions tied to the position of the Meskhetiyu. The figure's central line of sight was aligned with the celestial pole, allowing the deceased to use the chart to tell time in the afterlife, ensuring their soul performed the necessary rituals at the correct celestial hour to aid in their journey. The association with the disruptive god Seth adds a fascinating layer of irony to this story. Seth, often portrayed as the villain in the Osiris myth, was also a god of immense strength and necessary force. By taming his chaotic power, his very limb, and using its orderly, predictable motion to measure time, the Egyptians demonstrated a profound philosophical concept that even the forces of chaos, when properly harnessed and understood by the principles of Maat, could be made to serve order and structure. The bull's thigh was a paradox in the sky, a symbol of conquered chaos that became the ultimate instrument of cosmic order, its unwavering movement through the dark hours a guarantee that the sun would, indeed, find its way back. Yet all these celestial beliefs and observations, the Decans, the solar journey, the stories of Sa and Sopdet, found their most stunning and comprehensive expression not on a scroll of papyrus, but carved in stone upon a temple ceiling. Deep within the temple of Hathor at Dendera, hidden for centuries, lies what many consider the crown jewel of Egyptian astronomy, the magnificent Dendera Zodiac. This breathtaking bas-relief is far more than a simple star chart. It is a complete cosmic tapestry, a final, glorious synthesis of millennia of native Egyptian tradition meeting the astronomical ideas of the Greco-Roman world. Carved during the Ptolemaic period, likely around 50 years before the Common Era, the circular slab presents a complex and crowded snapshot of the heavens. Imagine a giant stone disk, over 2.5 meters across, upon which the entire Egyptian cosmos is meticulously mapped. At its heart, you don't find a simple pole star, but a compelling arrangement of central figures. Often, a bear or a jackal animals associated with the circumpolar region stands atop a staff, representing the pivot around which the Imperishable Ones eternally turn. Surrounding this center is a ring of 36 figures, each representing one of the Decans, those crucial star groups that divided the Egyptian night and year into manageable, divine segments. These Decans are shown as human figures, falcons, or serpents, each holding a star, forever frozen in their sequential dance, but the most visually striking elements are the large, familiar figures that dominate the outer ring. Here, the traditional Egyptian constellations are portrayed with a vitality that is purely pharaonic. You can clearly see Meskhetiu, the bull's thigh, held aloft by a central pillar. There is Sa, the soul of Osiris, depicted not as a hunter but as a man running triumphantly, turned to look back at his divine consort, the goddess Sopdet, who follows him as a great cow with a star between her horns. The goddess Nut, the sky herself, arches across the top of the composition, swallowing and giving birth to the sun disk in a continuous cycle. This is the Egyptian sky as they had always seen it, populated by their gods and their myths. What makes the Dendera Zodiac so fascinating to historians, however, is the layer of foreign influence painted over this native core. Intermixed with these traditional Egyptian figures are the 12 signs of the Greco-Roman Zodiac, which were introduced to Egypt following the conquests of Alexander the Great. So, we see a classic depiction of the ram of Aries, the bull of Taurus, and the twins of Gemini seamlessly integrated into the older Egyptian celestial scheme. This isn't a replacement of one system by another, it's a brilliant and unique fusion. The Greek zodiac provided a new framework for mapping the sun's annual path, the ecliptic, while the Egyptian decans and constellations maintained their role in timekeeping and expressing deeper mythological truths. This incredible artifact serves as a final chapter, a last testament to the enduring power of Egyptian star lore. It shows a priesthood, under foreign rule, actively working to preserve their ancient celestial traditions by adapting them to new ideas. They were saying in stone that their gods still ruled the heavens, even if they now shared the sky with the symbols of their occupiers. The ceiling was a ritual tool, a massive astrological chart meant to be used by the priests of Hathor to determine the precise timing of festivals and to understand the influence of the heavens on earthly events. It was their ultimate attempt to create a fixed, permanent record of the entire sky, ensuring that the knowledge of the Decans, the journey of Ra, and the promise of the Imperishable Ones would never be lost, forever watching over the rituals performed in the temple below. This meticulous tracking of the stars evolved from general observation into an exact science, one that required a precise and portable system for telling time through the long desert nights. The solution they developed was nothing short of brilliant: the diagonal star table, a complex calendar and clock mechanism painted inside coffin lids and on temple ceilings. Think of it not as a simple chart, but as a sophisticated graphic computer designed to decode the time by reading the language of the Decans. The basic principle was elegant. A diagonal star table is typically a grid, with the 12 hours of the night listed along one side and the 36 decans, each representing a 10-day week, along the other. The key to reading it lies in its diagonal lines. Each diagonal row corresponds to a specific decan, and the table is constructed so that on the first day of the Egyptian New Year, the day Sirius rose, the first decan on the list would be the one marking the first hour of the night. But as the year progressed, the heliacal rising of each decan shifted slightly. The diagonal layout of the table perfectly accounts for this annual drift, allowing a priest to simply find the current date, locate the corresponding decan, and read straight across the grid to see which decan was meant to be culminating or highest in the sky for each hour of that particular night. Using this tool was an active observational process. A temple astronomer would venture out into the cool night air at a specific moment, perhaps at the end of the first hour of night. He would look to the southern sky, the meridian, and identify which decan was crossing that highest point at that very moment. He would then cross-reference this observation with his diagonal table for that particular 10-day period. If the decan he observed matched the one predicted by the table, the clock was accurate. If it did not, it was a sign that the calendar or the observation needed adjustment. This practice turned each night into a continuous act of cosmic verification, a constant dialogue between the predicted order of the heavens and its actual, visible manifestation. These tables were far more than technical aids. They were sacred guides for the afterlife. Placing a diagonal star chart inside a coffin was an act of profound spiritual necessity. It provided the deceased with the knowledge to navigate the eternal night of the Jewat. The soul needed to know which decan ruled which hour to properly recite the required spells and passwords to get past the demonic gatekeepers of the underworld. A mistake in timing could mean eternal oblivion. This celestial map was, therefore, a crucial piece of equipment for the soul's journey, ensuring the deceased could join the perpetual voyage of the sun god and the Imperishable Ones, keeping time with the gods for all eternity. Moving beyond the fixed patterns of the constellations, the ancient Egyptian astronomers also turned their gaze toward the most enigmatic and unpredictable lights in the night sky, the planets. They called them the Sekiju, which translates beautifully to the Wanderers, because unlike the steadfast decanal stars that rose with clockwork precision, these brilliant points of light seemed to move of their own free will, charting their own unique and mysterious paths against the backdrop of the fixed stars. Each of the 5 planets visible to the naked eye was not merely observed, it was named, worshipped, and intricately woven into their celestial mythology as a distinct divine presence. The planet we know as Mercury was called Sebeg, a name that connects it to the god Seth. This association might seem puzzling given Seth's chaotic reputation, but it reveals their nuanced understanding of the planet's behavior. Mercury is a swift, elusive, and often difficult to spot planet, never straying far from the sun's glare and appearing only briefly in the dawn or twilight sky. Its quick, seemingly erratic movements were interpreted as a reflection of Seth's unpredictable and turbulent nature, a celestial embodiment of the god's disruptive yet potent energy darting through the heavens. Venus, the brightest of the planets, presented a fascinating duality that the Egyptians explained through 2 separate divine identities. When it appeared in the east before sunrise, blazing as the magnificent morning star, they knew it as Bennu, connecting it to the heron-like Bennu bird, a symbol of rebirth and renewal that was an early precursor to the Greek phoenix. This luminous herald of the dawn was seen as a promise of the sun's imminent return, yet, when that very same object shone in the west after sunset as the evening star, it took on a completely different name and meaning, Waidi. In this guise, it was a celestial ferryman, a companion to the setting sun, helping to guide Ra's barque as it began its perilous journey into the underworld. This dual identity for a single celestial body showcases their sophisticated ability to hold 2 complementary truths at once, seeing the same planet as both a symbol of beginnings and endings. The red hue of Mars did not escape their notice, earning it the powerful name Horus the Red, or Horus of the Horizon. The color red held deep significance in Egyptian culture, often associated with the scorching, destructive power of the desert and, by extension, with the god Seth. To see this red wanderer moving through the realm of the stars was to witness a celestial manifestation of the eternal struggle between Horus and Seth. Its appearance could be interpreted as a sign of conflict, a warning of strife, or a reminder that the forces of chaos were active in the cosmos, requiring the constant vigilance of Ma'at to maintain balance. Jupiter, the largest and often one of the brightest planets, was given a name that reflected its perceived majesty and stability: Horus, who limits the two lands, or Horus the Bull. This title links the planet directly to the kingship of Horus and his role as a unifier and protector. In a culture where the pharaoh was the living embodiment of Horus, the steady, commanding presence of Jupiter moving with a slow, regal pace through the stars would have been seen as a powerful celestial endorsement of the king's authority, a sign that the god was watching over and defining the borders of the kingdom from his throne in the sky. Finally, the slow, deliberate journey of Saturn was interpreted through the name Horus Bull of the Sky. This title emphasizes strength, endurance, and unwavering power. Saturn's incredibly slow orbit, it takes nearly 30 years to circle the ecliptic, would have made it appear as a patient, persistent, and unchanging sentinel compared to the quicker movements of the other planets. Its steadfast presence resonated with the image of a mighty bull, a symbol of potent, unstoppable force, patiently patrolling the celestial realms and embodying an eternal, muscular kind of order that even the other gods would respect. While the sun and stars provided the grand framework for the year and the night, the ever-changing moon offered a finer, more intimate measure of time, one deeply woven into the fabric of their rituals and presided over by one of their most complex gods. The moon's 29.5-day cycle of waxing and waning presented a clear, visible rhythm that was impossible to ignore, and the ancient Egyptians harnessed this rhythm to create a sophisticated lunar calendar that operated in perfect harmony with their stellar solar year. This wasn't a separate system, it was an essential overlay, a divine counterpoint that gave structure to their spiritual and civic life. The administration of this lunar calendar fell to the priesthood, and it was governed by a simple, yet brilliant, observational rule. Each lunar month was declared to begin on the morning when the waning crescent moon could no longer be seen in the eastern sky just before sunrise. This day, the first of the month, was known as Pies Dientil, meaning the crescent. The priests would officially announce the new month once this disappearance was confirmed, setting into motion a 29 or 30-day cycle of festivals, market days, and religious obligations. This meant their lunar calendar was not mathematically fixed, but was instead based on direct observation, keeping it perfectly in sync with the actual phases of the moon in the sky. Presiding over this entire celestial endeavor was the ibis-headed god Thoth, the divine scribe, the master of wisdom, magic, and most importantly, the measurement of time. He was known as he who calculates the heavens, the counter of the stars, the measurer of the earth. Thoth was believed to be the inventor of the calendar itself, and it was his sacred duty to ensure the harmonious alignment of the lunar and solar cycles. In art, he is often shown holding a palm rib, a notched tally stick used for measuring time and recording the reigns of kings. As the god of writing and knowledge, he was the natural lord of all calculation, including the complex math required to keep a lunar calendar from drifting out of sync with the solar year over time. This relationship between the moon and Thoth ran even deeper into the very core of their mythology concerning cosmic balance. One of the most important stories tells of a great game of Senet, the ancient board game, played between Thoth and the moon itself. The moon at that time was said to shine as brightly as the sun, a state of affairs that disrupted the natural order of light and dark. Thoth, in his role as the maintainer of Maat, played the game and won. His prize was a measure of the moon's light, which he then used to create the 5 extra days needed to complete the solar year. These were the epagonal days, added at the end of the year and considered to be the birthdays of the gods Osiris, Horus, Seth, Isis, and Nephthys. In this way, Thoth didn't just measure the moon's light, he literally sculpted time from it, creating the necessary bridge between the lunar and solar cycles and establishing the rhythm of the entire world. The practical application of this lunar timekeeping was most visible in the scheduling of religious festivals, while the solar calendar, signaled by Sirius, marked the large-scale seasons of the agricultural year. The lunar calendar dictated the precise dates for countless temple ceremonies and public holidays. A festival might be scheduled for the 2nd day of the first lunar month of the season of harvest, or the day of the full moon in the month of Pachons. The most important festivals, like the beautiful festival of the valley or the mysteries of Osiris at Abydos, were almost always timed to specific lunar phases, often the full moon, when its light would illuminate nocturnal processions and rituals. This lunar scheduling infused these events with a layer of celestial magic, tying the worship of the gods directly to the silent, silver dance of the moon overhead. This system of dual calendars, one solar and civil, the other lunar and religious, showcases the Egyptians' incredible sophistication. They lived by 2 complementary rhythms, the steadfast, predictable journey of the sun that defined their civic and agricultural life, and the fluid, changing cycle of the moon that governed their spiritual practice. It was Thoth's wisdom that allowed them to harmonize these 2 rhythms, using his lunar measure to ensure that their festivals always occurred in the correct season. The moon was not just a lamp in the night, it was the clock of the gods, its gentle phases reminding them that even within the grand, unchanging order of the cosmos, there was a beautiful and necessary rhythm of change, decay, and renewal. Turning our gaze further north, beyond the steady turning of the bull's thigh, the ancient Egyptians mapped a menagerie of powerful and protective figures onto the darker, less populated regions of the northern sky. Here, the constellations were not just timekeepers or mythic heroes, they were potent amalgamations of danger and divinity, representing the ever-present balance between protection and peril in the cosmic order. Among the most formidable of these was the celestial hippopotamus, a figure we would recognize as part of our Draco constellation, but to the Egyptians, this was no abstract dragon, it was a manifestation of the ferocious and protective goddess Taweret, the Great One. Taweret's appearance was a blend of the most powerful and dangerous creatures known to them. She had the body of a pregnant hippopotamus, the limbs of a lion, and the back and tail of a monstrous Nile crocodile. On Earth, she was the guardian of mothers and children, a deity invoked during childbirth to ward off evil spirits, but in the sky, her role expanded into the cosmic. Positioned in the northern heavens, near the imperishable, unchanging pole, she was seen as a sentinel against the forces of chaos that constantly threatened to disrupt creation. Her open mouth, often depicted facing the circumpolar stars, was not a gesture of aggression but a permanent stance of defiance, ready to devour any malevolent force that dared approach the eternal, ordered realm of the Imperishable Ones. She was the divine bouncer at the door of eternity, ensuring that only the righteous souls could join that undying crew. Yet, the protective power of these northern constellations always came with a sharp, dangerous edge. The Egyptians possessed a profound understanding of duality, that a force powerful enough to protect could also, if not properly respected and appeased, become a source of immense danger. This duality was perfectly embodied by another northern figure, the celestial crocodile. This creature, often associated with the god Sopdet, resided in the same general region of the sky. Sobek was a god of immense power, fertility, and military might, but he was also a personification of the sudden, deadly danger lurking in the Nile's murky waters. In the cosmic balance, the celestial crocodile served a crucial, if terrifying, purpose. It was believed that this great beast could, at any moment, devour the other stars, causing them to vanish from the sky. This was not a myth of a past event, but a constant present threat. This belief provided a brilliant mythological explanation for the unpredictable phenomena they observed: the sudden disappearance of a star due to atmospheric conditions, the fleeting streak of a meteor burning out, or the slow dimming of a variable star. Instead of random astronomical events, these were seen as the actions of the celestial crocodile, a reminder that the orderly procession of the Decans and the safety of the circumpolar realm were maintained only through constant vigilance and the appeasement of these powerful deities. The sky was not a static painting, it was a dynamic and sometimes dangerous ecosystem. Completing this northern triad of power was a celestial lion, a figure that would eventually find its way into the Greek constellation of Leo, but with a distinctly Egyptian purpose. The lion was an ancient symbol of pharaonic power and the fierce, scorching heat of the sun. The great Sphinx at Giza, with the body of a lion and the head of a king, is the most famous earthly fusion of these ideas. In the sky, the celestial lion was often associated with the goddess Sekhmet, the powerful one, the fierce eye of Ra, who could bring plague and destruction upon humanity. Her breath was the hot desert wind, and her roar was the sound of a coming storm. Yet, like Taweret, Sekhmet's destructive power was also a source of protection. She could be appeased through ritual and worship, turning her fury away from Egypt and toward its enemies. The presence of her leonine form in the northern sky was a permanent warning and a promise. It was a warning of the devastating power of the sun that could wither crops and bring drought, but also a promise of the pharaoh's formidable strength to protect the borders of the land from external chaos, just as these celestial figures protected the borders of the ordered cosmos. These northern constellations together formed a divine defense grid. The hippopotamus stood guard at the pole, the crocodile patrolled the waters of the celestial Nile, and the lion surveyed the arid realms from its majestic post, each one a crucial participant in the endless, delicate work of maintaining Maat against the ever-lurking threat of Isfet. While the northern sky was guarded by its powerful and protective beasts, the southern expanse offered a different vision altogether, a shimmering, star-dusted river cutting through the heavens, mirroring the life-giving waters of the Nile below. The Egyptians saw the Milky Way not as a distant galaxy, but as the celestial incarnation of their own great river. They called it Werns, the great river in the sky, and it was along these banks of light that they mapped some of their most vital constellations, each one a guidepost for the most perilous journey of all, the soul's passage through the Juat, the underworld. To navigate this southern realm was to follow the path of the sun god himself during his nightly voyage. The Juat was not a place of punishment, but a complex and challenging landscape the soul had to traverse to achieve rebirth. The stars here served as both a map and a narrative, illustrating the trials the deceased would face. One of the most prominent southern figures was the crocodile god, Sobek, in his stellar form. Unlike his northern counterpart who patrolled the skies as a potential threat, the southern Sobek was often shown as a more ambivalent force. He could be a dangerous obstacle in the river, waiting to snare the unprepared soul, or a powerful ally if the deceased knew the correct spells to appease him, his jagged back often traced by the fainter stars near the tail of our modern Scorpius. Perhaps the most crucial of all these southern constellations was the Great One, a massive figure often associated with the stars we know as Centaurus and Lupus. This was not a single god but a composite, protective deity, sometimes depicted as a standing man with an animal head, holding a spear or a knife. His role was that of a divine sentry standing guard over the eastern bank of the celestial Nile. His primary duty was to defend the solar barque from its greatest enemy, the serpent Apophis, who lurked in the darkest, starless voids of the southern sky, waiting for his chance to strike. For the soul of the deceased, successfully identifying and praising the Great One was a critical step. He was the celestial bouncer who could either grant passage further into the Duat or deny it, casting the soul into oblivion. The logic of this celestial geography was stunningly precise. The earthly Nile flowed from south to north, bringing life and fertility to the land. In perfect symmetry, the celestial Nile in the south was seen as the source of this earthly river. The annual inundation, triggered by the heliacal rising of Sirius, was believed to be the overflow from this heavenly counterpart. This created a perfect interconnected circuit of existence. Water and divine energy flowed down from the Werns in the south, flooded the land, sustained life, and then, upon death, the soul would journey back southward, retracing the sun's path along this glittering highway to its source in the stars, in hopes of being reborn. This belief made the southern sky the ultimate destination. The soul's goal was not to remain in the underworld, but to successfully complete its journey and emerge, reborn, in the eastern horizon, just as the sun did each morning. The constellations of the south were the landmarks for this voyage. The Book of the Dead and other funerary texts are filled with spells designed to help the deceased recognize these stellar figures. One spell might grant the knowledge to identify the spirit of the Bright One, a star perhaps in the vicinity of Canopus, another incredibly bright southern star. Another spell provided the password to get past the guardian of the bank, a figure stationed at a critical bend in the celestial river. This was the profound purpose of Egyptian star lore made manifest. It was a practical, spiritual technology for eternity. By learning the names and forms of the southern constellations during life, and by having their descriptions and the required spells inscribed on their coffin walls or on papyrus placed in their tomb, the deceased was equipped with a celestial guidebook. They could sail their own small red boat through the Duat, using the Milky Way as their roadmap, identifying the guardian constellations, avoiding the celestial crocodiles, and ultimately joining the crew of Ra's barque to be reborn with him at dawn, proving that their understanding of the stars was the deepest kind of wisdom, one that promised to light the way through the darkness of death itself. This incredible celestial precision finds its ultimate expression not in painted tombs or temple ceilings, but in the very stone of the pyramids themselves. The most famous and enduring example of this is the alignment of the Great Pyramid of Giza with incredible, almost supernatural accuracy. The four sides of its massive base are aligned almost perfectly to the four cardinal directions north, south, east, and west, with an error margin of less than 1/15 of a single degree. To achieve this, the ancient Egyptian architects didn't use a magnetic compass, they used the stars. They likely employed a method known as simultaneous transit, carefully tracking the circular path of a specific circumpolar star around the north celestial pole. By marking the points on the horizon where the star rose and set, and then bisecting that angle, they could find true north with astonishing precision, turning the entire pyramid into a giant, immovable astronomical monument fixed to the axis of the sky itself. But the starry connections don't stop at the base. Deep within the heart of the Great Pyramid, in the so-called King's and Queen's chambers, are narrow, mysterious shafts that slope upwards through thousands of tons of masonry toward the outside world. For years, their purpose was a subject of intense debate. Were they ventilation shafts? Were they symbolic pathways? The work of astronomers like Virginia Trimble and Alexander Badoy in the 1960s presented a compelling answer. They were precision-built telescopes to the heavens, targeting specific, vitally important stars. The southern shaft from the King's Chamber was aimed directly at the constellation of Orion, at the star Al-Nitak, which is the very star identified as the celestial embodiment of Osiris, the god of resurrection. This wasn't a random alignment, it was a direct pipeline for the pharaoh's soul. Imagine the pharaoh's spirit, released from its mummified body, needing a clear path to follow. These narrow stone channels provided that guidance. At the precise time of the pyramid's construction, around 2,500 years before the Common Era, the southern shaft would have framed the belt of Orion perfectly, acting as a sightline for the king's ba, or soul, to ascend directly to its eternal home among the imperishable stars. This transformed the pyramid from a mere tomb into a launch facility for the afterlife, with the star shafts serving as the ultimate navigational aid, ensuring the royal spirit wouldn't get lost on its journey to the celestial Jewad. Simultaneously, the northern shafts from both chambers were fixed upon a different set of crucial stars. The northern shaft from the king's chamber was meticulously aligned with Thuban, a star in the constellation of Draco. Today, we use Polaris as our North Star, but due to the slow wobble of the Earth's axis, a phenomenon known as precession, Thuban held that honored position during the era of the Old Kingdom. It was the pivot around which the entire cosmos appeared to turn, the heart of the circumpolar region, the domain of the undying, imperishable ones. By pointing directly at Thuban, this shaft offered the pharaoh's soul a second, equally vital destination: eternal life among the unchanging, never-setting stars, the ultimate symbol of permanence and stability. This duality of purpose is breathtaking. The southern shaft targeted Osiris Orion, promising cyclical resurrection and rebirth within the cosmic story of death and renewal. The northern shaft targeted the circumpolar realm, promising a different kind of eternity, a static, unchanging existence outside the cycles of time. The pyramid's design offered the pharaoh two distinct paths to immortality, covering all the celestial bases and demonstrating a profound understanding of both the cyclical and constant aspects of their cosmos. The very stone of the pyramid was programmed with astronomical data, its angles and alignments calculated centuries in advance to ensure these precise stellar relationships would be locked in place for eternity. This celestial ambition extended beyond the Great Pyramid to the entire Giza Plateau. The layout of the three main pyramids, those of Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure, has long been noted for its seemingly intentional mimicry of the three stars of Orion's belt. The alignment isn't a perfect mirror image, but a fascinating terrestrial translation. The two larger pyramids are offset slightly, just as the two brighter stars of the belt are offset, with the third, smaller pyramid lying slightly askew like the dimmer third star, Mintaka. Furthermore, the pattern is not aligned to the cardinal directions, but is rotated, matching the angle of Orion's belt as it appears in the night sky. The nearby Nile River mirrors the Milky Way, completing the cosmic map. This suggests the entire necropolis was designed as a sacred landscape, a permanent echo of the heavens on Earth, ensuring the power of the celestial Osiris would forever radiate down upon the burial places of the divine kings. This celestial precision was not confined to the tombs of the dead, it was brought to life in the very temples where the living worshipped, where architecture became a mechanism for capturing moments of divine light. The ancient Egyptians designed their sacred structures as instruments of stone and sunlight, engineering them so that the heavens would actively participate in their most holy rituals. The grand temple complex of Karnak, a sprawling city of the gods dedicated primarily to Amun-Ra, offers a stunning example of this intent. Its main axis is meticulously oriented so that on the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, the rising sun would blaze directly down the entire length of the processional avenue, through the towering pylons, and into the deepest, darkest parts of the sanctuary. This was no happy accident of construction. It was a deliberate act of architectural alignment, a way to demonstrate that even at the lowest ebb of the sun's power, its light could still be summoned to fill the house of its god, reaffirming the promise of its return and the renewal of its strength. The effect would have been nothing short of miraculous for the priests participating in the daily ritual. After the long night hours, as they prepared to awaken the divine statue within the naos, the most sacred inner chamber, the first rays of the solstice sun would penetrate the sanctuary. This light would gradually illuminate the cult statue of the god, seemingly bringing it to life from the feet upwards as the sun climbed higher. In that moment, the distinction between the physical sun in the sky and the god within the temple dissolved. Ra was not just being worshipped, he was physically present, his essence filling the room with a tangible, golden energy. This annual event transformed the temple from a mere building into an active participant in the cosmic order, a stone engine designed to harness the specific power of the solstice and use it to recharge the spiritual authority of both the god and the king who served as his intermediary. Yet perhaps the most famous and dramatic manifestation of this principle is found far to the south, at the breathtaking site of Abu Simbel. Here, Ramesses II commissioned a monument not just to his own glory, but as a permanent testament to his divine connection to the solar cycle. The great temple was carved directly into the living rock of a cliff face, with 4 colossal statues of the seated pharaoh guarding its entrance. Its interior extends over 180 feet back into the mountain, culminating in a sacred sanctuary where 4 gods sit in perpetual stillness: Ta, the god of craftsmen and the underworld; Amun-Ra, the king of the gods; the deified Ramesses himself; and Ra-Horakhti, the falcon-headed god of the rising sun. The genius of its construction lies in its precise orientation. The entire temple was angled so that twice a year, on approximately February 21st and October 21st, the rising sun would perform a precise and breathtaking miracle. A shaft of sunlight would travel down the long, dark corridor of the temple, pierce the inner sanctuary, and illuminate 3 of the 4 statues seated there. The light would first fall upon Amun-Ra, then light up the figure of the divine Ramesses, and finally come to rest upon Ra-Horakhti, bathing them in brilliant light for a period of about 20 minutes before retreating. The 4th god, Ta, associated with the darkness of the underworld, remained forever in shadow, never touched by the sun's rays. These dates are widely believed to correspond to significant events in the pharaoh's life, most likely his birthday and his coronation day. On these mornings, the event was a powerful piece of political and theological theater. It visually demonstrated that the king's reign was not just sanctioned by the gods, but was an integral, preordained part of the solar journey itself. The sun itself was obeying a divine schedule set down at the founding of the temple, returning year after year to acknowledge and renew the pharaoh's power. For the priests and select officials who witnessed it, the message was undeniable. Ramesses was not merely a ruler, he was a fundamental component of the universe's structure, his legacy forever woven into the immutable movements of the heavens, guaranteed to repeat for all eternity. This extraordinary ability to read the sky wasn't just for guiding souls or aligning temples, it was the very foundation of their daily reality, giving structure to their year and creating a calendar of such remarkable accuracy that its basic framework is still used across the globe today. While many ancient cultures relied on the messy, inconsistent cycles of the moon, which creates a year of only 354 days, the Egyptians sought a more permanent solution written in the predictable stars. Their genius was to combine 2 celestial clocks, the annual solar cycle and the nightly dance of the Decans, into one elegant, unified system. The heart of their calendar beat to the rhythm of the decanal stars. As we've seen, they divided the band of sky into 36 star groups, each taking a turn heralding the dawn for a 10-day period. This created a natural year of 360 days divided into 36 neat, 10-day weeks. But their meticulous astronomical observations revealed a crucial truth. The solar year, the time it takes for the Earth to complete one orbit around the Sun, is actually closer to 365¼ days. The stellar year and the solar year were out of sync by about 5 days. The heliacal rising of Sirius, that critical event that signaled the Nile's flood, would slowly drift through their 360-day calendar if left uncorrected. Their solution was both simple and profound. Rather than force the stars to fit their math, they let the cosmos dictate the terms. They officially acknowledged those 5 extra days, adding them to the end of their year as a separate 5-day period. These were the epagomenal days, and they were considered to be outside of the regular year, a time of both danger and celebration, believed to be the birthdays of the gods Osiris, Horus, Seth, Isis, and Nephthys. This created a fixed year of 365 days, making the Egyptian civil calendar the first in history to use a solar-based system of this length. This calendar was a triumph of practical astronomy. It was divided into 3 seasons of 4 months each, perfectly mirroring the cycle of the Nile and the agricultural life it sustained. There was Akhit, the inundation, when the floodwaters covered the land; Perit, the emergence, when the waters receded and crops were sown and began to grow; and Shemu, the harvest, the dry season when the crops were gathered. The predictable, stable nature of this calendar made it an invaluable tool for tax collection, record keeping, and organizing the massive labor forces needed for state projects like pyramid building. Its clarity and reliability were so superior that it was adopted by later astronomers, including the Greeks, and eventually formed the basis for the Julian calendar, the direct precursor to the Gregorian calendar we use today. Yet the Egyptians were perfectly aware of that remaining quarter day. Their calendar didn't include a leap year, so their new year advanced by 1 day every 4 years relative to the actual solar cycle. This meant that the official calendar date of Sirius's heliacal rising would slowly march through their year, only realigning with the actual astronomical event after 1,460 years, a period known as a Sothic cycle. Rather than seeing this as a flaw, they understood it as a feature, a long-term astronomical clock ticking away in the background, a testament to their deep understanding that even their precise system was part of a much grander, more complex cosmic mechanism. But to truly see the sky as the Egyptians did, we must venture beyond the static charts and alignments and into the dynamic, dramatic stories they witnessed unfolding overhead each night. This was a celestial theater where the great myths of their religion were performed in an endless cycle, with constellations and planets serving as the divine actors on a stage of unimaginable scale. The most epic of these productions was the brutal and eternal conflict between Horus and Set, a struggle for kingship and order that was mapped directly onto the stars. The Egyptians saw this battle not as a single event from a forgotten past, but as a continuous, cosmic war playing out in the movements of the heavens. The constellation they knew as Meskhet Hiu, the bull's thigh, was far more than a clock. It was a trophy from this very conflict. The myth tells us that during one of their many violent encounters, the chaotic god Set transformed into a powerful black boar, some versions say a mighty bull, and gored the eye of Horus, shattering it into pieces. In retaliation, Horus and his followers battled Set in his bovine form and managed to sever its foreleg. This limb, representing the conquered power of chaos, was then purified and elevated to the northern sky by the god Thoth, where it became fixed as the circumpolar constellation we recognize. Its eternal, unwavering rotation was a permanent monument to the victory of rightful order over chaos, a reminder that even the most destructive forces could be mastered and put to use in the service of man. This celestial drama also explained the unpredictable behavior of the planets. The red planet Mars, known as Horus the Red, was seen as the god himself in his most fierce and warlike aspect, actively pursuing his enemy across the sky. Conversely, the swift and elusive Mercury, named Sebeg after Set, was interpreted as the chaotic god darting and hiding, his unpredictable movements reflecting his treacherous and slippery nature. Even a lunar eclipse was not merely an astronomical event, it was a moment of supreme danger, believed to be a temporary victory for Set as he attempted to devour the moon, the eye of Horus. The priests would respond with frantic rituals and loud noises to scare the chaos god away and restore the moon's light, reenacting the myth to maintain cosmic balance. The sky was not a peaceful place, it was a battleground where the fundamental struggle of their universe was forever being waged, yet no journey across this celestial stage was more perilous or more critical to all of creation than the nightly voyage of the sun god Ra through the 12 hours of the Duat. This was not a simple passage from west to east, it was a tense, action-packed odyssey through a subterranean world filled with bizarre landscapes, demonic gatekeepers, and the constant threat of annihilation. Each of the 12 hours of night represented a distinct region of this underworld, and the success of Ra's journey, and by extension, the rising of the next day's sun, depended on his ability to navigate each one successfully. The first hours saw the sun's barque, now transformed for its nocturnal journey, entering the realm of the recently deceased. The banks of the celestial river were lined with blessed souls who sang hymns of praise to Ra as he passed, their voices helping to propel the boat forward. But as the hours progressed, the landscape grew more treacherous. The fourth and fifth hours were particularly grueling, requiring the boat to be dragged over burning sandbanks and through a desert within the underworld, a trial that mirrored the harsh, life-sapping reality of the Egyptian desert. The crew of deities aboard the barque, including the warrior god Je and the cunning Heka, god of magic, worked tirelessly to overcome these obstacles. The greatest threat, however, always lay in wait during the seventh and most crucial hours. Here, in the deepest darkness, dwelled the serpent Apophis, the embodiment of pure chaos and nothingness. Each night he would launch his attack, attempting to coil his massive body around the solar barque and stop its progress, or worse, to open his cavernous mouth and swallow Ra and the entire ship whole. This triggered a colossal battle. The defender gods, like the fierce Seth who stood at the prow with a spear, would engage the serpent. Most importantly, the priestly magic from Earth was believed to be critical here. The rituals performed in temples throughout Egypt were thought to project real power into the Duat, magically binding Apophis and weakening him so the gods could prevail. Emerging victorious from this battle, the rejuvenated barque entered the final hours. In the 11th hour, a moment of profound transformation occurred. The scarab beetle god, Khepri, representing the morning sun, became fused with the form of Ra, symbolizing the god's imminent rebirth. The elderly, weary sun god of the day was now becoming the young, vibrant sun of the dawn. By the 12th and final hour, the barque, now glowing with renewed light, reached the eastern horizon. It was met by the goddess Nut, who prepared to give birth to it once more. As the first sliver of light broke over the horizon, the reborn sun god, now in the form of Khepri, emerged from between her thighs, and the cycle began anew, proving once again that order had triumphed over chaos and life had conquered death. This entire epic saga, from sunset to sunrise, was the most important story ever told, and the Egyptians believed they witnessed its successful conclusion with every new dawn. This sophisticated understanding of the cosmos was meticulously preserved in one of the most remarkable documents to survive from ancient Egypt, a text known as the Fundamentals of the Course of the Stars, or more commonly today, the Book of Nut. Far from being a simple collection of myths, This was a comprehensive cosmic guidebook, a detailed theological and scientific treatise that mapped the mechanics of the universe as the Egyptians understood it. Its primary purpose was to describe the daily solar cycle and the motions of the stars and moon, but it wove these precise astronomical observations into a profound religious narrative, revealing a worldview where science and spirituality were seamlessly and elegantly fused. The text is most famously preserved on the ceilings of the tombs of Ramesses IV, Ramesses VI, and Ramesses IX in the Valley of the Kings, as well as on several papyri and even a magical healing statue. At the center of its sprawling diagram is the overarching figure of the sky goddess Nut, her body arched protectively over the earth god Geb, who lies beneath her. This iconic image is more than just decoration, it is the central thesis of the entire document. Nut's body is the chart itself, divided into detailed sections that annotate or form with the names of constellations and the pathways of celestial bodies, transforming the goddess into a living, breathing map of the heavens. The Book of Nut delves into breathtakingly precise astronomical detail. It carefully catalogs the behavior of the stars, explaining that those in the northern sky are the imperishable ones that never set, while those in the southern sky are subject to birth and death, rising and setting with the sun. It describes the sun's journey in two phases, its visible passage across Nut's body during the day, and its invisible, perilous voyage through her torso during the 12 hours of night. The text even offers a complex explanation for the moon's phases, attributing its waning and waxing to a divine game of chance between the moon and the god Thoth, who periodically wins and takes a portion of its light. Perhaps its most striking feature is its classification of the stars according to their observable behavior, demonstrating a truly scientific impulse to categorize the natural world. The text identifies four distinct groups: those who never know destruction, the circumpolar stars, those who know not rest, the planets or wanderers, and the decanal stars, which are further divided into those that are bold of face and those that are weak of face, likely referring to their relative brightness and visibility. This systematic approach shows the Egyptian priests were not just storytellers, but keen, methodical observers who sought to create a logical framework for the complexities they witnessed overhead. Ultimately, the Book of Nut served a dual purpose that perfectly encapsulates the Egyptian mind. For the priests and astronomers, it was a practical scientific manual, providing the foundational knowledge needed to accurately predict celestial events, maintain the calendar, and tell time through the night. But for the soul of the deceased, whose tomb it adorned, it was something far greater, a divine roadmap to eternity. By containing this sacred knowledge on their burial chamber ceiling, the king was provided with the celestial instructions needed to navigate the Duat, join the crew of the solar barque, and achieve rebirth among the imperishable stars, ensuring his journey through the body of the goddess would end in everlasting life. This profound celestial knowledge wasn't just written in stone or painted on coffins, it was lived and breathed by a dedicated class of scholar priests who served as the official astronomers of the state. Perched on the flat rooftops of temples and within specially constructed observation towers, these men were the keepers of time and the interpreters of the divine will written in the stars. Their role was absolutely critical, blending the duties of a scientist, a priest, and a civil servant into one revered profession. They were the human link between the celestial cycles above and the daily rhythm of life along the Nile, turning their precise observations into practical guidance for an entire civilization. Their primary observatory was often the temple roof itself, a clean, elevated platform above the haze and dust of the city, offering an unobstructed view of the horizon in every direction. Some larger temples, like the one at Dendera, even featured dedicated stone structures with sloping ramps leading to these rooftop platforms, confirming their use as permanent astronomical stations. Here, the priests would work through the night, equipped with simple but incredibly effective tools. Their most important instrument was the merkit, a curious-looking device consisting of a narrow, palm leaf rib with a slit cut down its center, mounted on a small plumb bob. By aligning the slit with a specific star and using the plumb line to ensure a true vertical, a priest could measure the exact time of a star's rising or setting with remarkable accuracy against a notched horizontal bar. Working in pairs, these astronomers would patiently track the slow, majestic drift of the circumpolar constellations like the bull's thigh, using its handle as the hour hand on their celestial clock to partition the night into its 12 equal parts. But their most anxiously awaited duty was the vigil for the heliacal rising of a star, that magical, fleeting moment when a star first becomes visible again in the pre-dawn glow after a period of invisibility. For the star Sirius, this single observation would trigger a cascade of events across the entire kingdom, officially declaring the new year and the imminent arrival of the life-giving inundation. The records they kept were meticulous and continuous, stretching over generations and even centuries. These weren't mere lists of events, they were detailed logs noting the position of planets, the timing of lunar phases, and the precise dates of significant stellar events. This long-term data collection allowed them to detect subtle patterns and cycles, like the slow precession of the equinoxes and the 1,460-year Sothic cycle. This accumulated wisdom, passed down from master to apprentice within the temple walls, gave Egyptian astronomy a predictive power that was unparalleled in the ancient world, transforming their celestial observations from simple ritual into a true, data-driven science. This knowledge directly shaped the fate of the nation. Their predictions dictated the agricultural calendar, telling farmers exactly when to prepare their fields for the flood and when to begin the harvest. They determined the precise timing of religious festivals, ensuring that the rituals for Osiris or the beautiful festival of the valley were performed at the most cosmically potent moment. Even the civil calendar, used for tax collection and administrative records, was maintained and corrected based on their celestial measurements. The grand architectural alignments of Karnak and Abu Simbel, which we marvel at today, would have been impossible without the precise astronomical date these priests provided to the architects. Ultimately, these astronomer priests were seen as more than just technicians. They were the essential mediators between the people and the cosmos. By correctly reading the sky and performing the accompanying rituals, they believed they actively helped Ra defeat Apophis each night, ensured the sun would rise, and maintain the delicate balance of Mat against the ever-present threat of chaos. Their nightly vigil on the temple roof was a sacred duty, an act of participation in the cosmic order that secured the continued existence and prosperity of the entire world. To truly grasp the ingenuity of their timekeeping, we must look beyond the grand myths to a system of breathtaking precision, a celestial calendar written not on papyrus but in the very movement of the stars themselves. This was the decanal system, a sophisticated framework that divided the night sky into 36 distinct star groups, each one acting as a divine timepiece. Imagine a vast star-studded belt encircling the heavens, segmented into 36 sections. These were the decans, and their sequential, predictable dance across the night sky provided the ancient Egyptians with one of history's most accurate and spiritually significant ways to measure time. The entire system hinged on a beautifully simple astronomical event observed just before dawn, the heliacal rising. This is the moment a star, after being invisible for a period due to the sun's glare, makes its first brief reappearance on the eastern horizon, glowing for just a few minutes before being washed out by the rising sun. The Egyptians observed that a new one of these 36 decans would perform this delicate dawn appearance approximately every 10 days. It was a celestial conveyor belt of time, with each new decan heralding the start of a new 10-day week in their calendar. This created a stellar year of 360 days, a perfect, observable cycle that formed the backbone of their civil administration, but their use of the decans extended far beyond marking the passage of weeks. These star groups also served as the world's first star clock, meticulously dividing the night itself into 12 equal hours. Here's how it worked. The astronomers would note which decan was culminating or reaching its highest point in the southern sky at the onset of complete darkness. This decan was designated as the ruler of the first hour of the night. As the night progressed, they would track the sequential rise of each subsequent decan, with a new one taking over the role of timekeeper for each hour that passed. This meant the entire night was partitioned not by the arbitrary movement of a shadow or the draining of a water clock, but by the majestic and predictable rotation of the cosmos itself. Each of these 36 decans was far more than a stop on a celestial clock. It was a divine entity in its own right, imbued with protective power and religious meaning. They were often depicted as deities, falcons, serpents, or other sacred symbols, and each was associated with specific prophecies, blessings, or potential dangers. Knowledge of these associations was absolutely critical, not just for the priests but for every soul hoping to navigate the afterlife. Funerary texts like the Book of the Dead are filled with spells that require the deceased to correctly name the decan that rules a particular hour, as this knowledge served as a password to get past the demonic guardians of the underworld. To know a decan's name and its nature was to wield a piece of divine power. This intricate knowledge was preserved and put to practical use through remarkable artifacts known as diagonal star tables. Painted inside coffin lids and on temple ceilings, these tables were complex grids that allowed a priest to determine the time and the ruling decan for any night of the year. The diagonal lines of the chart cleverly accounted for the slow, annual shift in the night sky, functioning as a permanent, portable astronomical almanac. A priest or a soul in the afterlife could simply find the current date, follow the diagonal, and know exactly which decan should be culminating at each hour, ensuring rituals were performed at the perfect celestial moment and the soul's journey remained on its sacred schedule. Yet for all their mastery in predicting the regular cycles of the heavens, the ancient Egyptians also looked upon the sky with a sense of profound awe and trepidation when faced with events that defied their meticulous predictions. Solar and lunar eclipses, the sudden appearance of a brilliant comet, or a storm of shooting stars, these were not part of the orderly dance of the decans or the predictable journey of Ra. These were terrifying irregularities, shocking disruptions in the celestial balance that could only be interpreted as direct and urgent messages from the gods, potent omens demanding immediate interpretation and response. A solar eclipse, the terrifying moment when the sun's life-giving disk was seemingly swallowed by an invisible force in the middle of the day, was viewed with particular horror. In a culture where the sun god's daily victory was essential for all life, his sudden and unexpected darkening was a cataclysmic event. The Egyptians saw this not as a simple astronomical alignment, but as a direct attack on Ra himself. The most common interpretation was that the great serpent of chaos, Apophis, had momentarily gained the upper hand in his eternal battle, successfully ensnaring the solar barque and threatening to plunge the world into permanent darkness. Alternatively, some texts suggest it was interpreted as the Eye of Ra, a manifestation of the sun god's own fierce and destructive power, turning its gaze upon the earth in anger. The sudden chill and the eerie silence that fell during totality were seen as a tangible wave of divine fury washing over the land. The official response to such an event was swift and ritualized. Priests, the interpreters of the divine will, would spring into action. they would consult their sacred texts and likely use the event's timing and duration to divine its specific meaning. Was it a warning to the pharaoh, a sign of displeasure with a specific temple's rites? Oracles might be consulted to determine which god was angry and what action was required to appease them. Temple rituals designed to aid Ra in his fight against Apophis, which were performed nightly, would be conducted with renewed fervor and desperation during the daylight hours. The goal was to lend their magical strength to the sun god, to help him break free from the serpent's coils and restore light to the world, thus reaffirming the victory of Maat over Isfet. While a solar eclipse was a direct assault on the sun god, a lunar eclipse, the eerie coppery dimming of the full moon, was seen as an attack on the moon, which the Egyptians called the second eye of Horus, or sometimes the eye of Thoth. The moon was a crucial timekeeping body and a protector of the night. Its violation was a serious omen. The most prevalent myth told that the chaotic god Seth, in the form of a black boar, had managed to temporarily devour or injure the eye. This explained the moon's gradual weakening and its reassuring return to full strength, symbolizing the eye's subsequent healing by Thoth. However, its occurrence outside of the expected mythic cycle was a dire warning that the forces of chaos were particularly strong and active. The appearance of a comet, with its long, ethereal tail cutting a silent path across the established star fields, was interpreted as a harbinger of radical change and upheaval. Unlike the predictable planets, a comet was a complete stranger in the familiar celestial landscape. Its sudden arrival and slow, majestic drift through the constellations of various gods could be read as a divine messenger, but its message was often ominous. Egyptian records, though sparse, suggest comets were associated with the death or rise of kings, the outbreak of war, famine, or pestilence. Its tail, resembling a serpent or a flowing lock of hair, could be seen as the fiery breath of a displeased deity or a sweeping broom from the sky, signaling the god's intention to cleanse or punish the land. Even the brief, brilliant streak of a meteor shooting across the night sky carried deep meaning. The Egyptians likely saw these falling stars not as burning rocks, but as literal events in their cosmic mythology. A common interpretation was that it represented a star or a minor deity falling from its boat in the celestial river, plummeting from the ordered heavens into the chaotic realms below. Alternatively, it could be seen as a divine spark, a piece of star stuff sent by the gods as a potent, if cryptic, sign. A sudden flash in a specific constellation might be interpreted as a god associated with that region making their presence known, for good or for ill. These celestial omens were considered so significant that they were often recorded in official state documents and annals, alongside records of military victories, the height of the Nile inundation, and the reign of pharaohs. A preserved text from the reign of Teklot II, for instance, explicitly mentions a lunar eclipse and directly links it to a period of social unrest and the king's efforts to appease the gods. This practice shows that the pharaoh and his court took these events with the utmost seriousness. A major eclipse or the prolonged appearance of a comet could influence royal decisions, from launching a military campaign to postponing a major festival, or ordering additional offerings and rituals at temples across the land to restore the fragile balance of the cosmos and secure the favor of the heavens once more. This profound celestial wisdom, meticulously refined over 3,000 years along the banks of the Nile, was far too valuable to remain confined to the desert. As the power of the pharaohs waned and new empires rose, Egypt's astronomical legacy began a long and fascinating journey outward, seeding the development of other great civilizations and quietly shaping our very understanding of the cosmos. The primary conduits for this knowledge were the Greeks, who from the 6th century before the Common Era onward began traveling to Egypt in earnest, drawn by its reputation as a land of ancient and secret wisdom. Philosophers and scholars like Thales, Pythagoras, and later Plato and Eudoxus are all recorded as having studied with Egyptian priests. These weren't mere tourist visits, they were intensive educational exchanges. The Greek historians Herodotus and Diodorus Siculus explicitly credited Egypt with being the source of much Greek astronomical knowledge. The Greeks didn't just adopt random ideas, they systematically absorbed the entire Egyptian framework of dividing the night into 12 hours and the year into 365 days, seamlessly integrating it into their own systems. They recognized the sheer practicality and precision of the Egyptian solar-based civil calendar, a stark contrast to the messy lunar calendars used elsewhere. But the borrowing went much deeper than just timekeeping. The Greek constellation of Orion is a direct descendant of the Egyptian Sa, the soul of Osiris. The star Sirius, so vital to the Egyptians, retained its importance in Greek culture, where its heliacal rising marked the dreaded dog days of summer. Even the Great Bear, our Big Dipper, was known to the Greeks as the wagon, a concept likely influenced by the Egyptian view of the circumpolar stars as a never-setting celestial procession. This transfer of knowledge reached its zenith following the conquests of Alexander the Great and the establishment of the Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt. The Great Library of Alexandria became the intellectual crossroads of the ancient world, a place where Greek rationalism and Egyptian observational data merged to create an unprecedented boom in scientific discovery. It was here that the Greek astronomer Claudius Ptolemy, living in Alexandria in the 2nd century of the Common Era, compiled his monumental work, the Almagest. This text, which became the astronomical Bible for over 1,000 years, is filled with Egyptian influence. His star catalog, the most comprehensive of antiquity, relied on centuries of precise Egyptian observations of stellar positions and movements. The very concept of dividing the celestial sphere into 360 degrees may have its roots in the Egyptian system of 36 decans, each governing 10 degrees of the sky's rotation. From Alexandria, this Greco-Egyptian fusion of astronomy was preserved and expanded by scholars in the Islamic world during the Middle Ages, who translated Ptolemy's works and refined his models, giving us the Arabic names for many stars that we still use today, like Betelgeuse and Aldebaran. These texts eventually made their way back into medieval Europe, forming the foundation upon which the Renaissance and the scientific revolution were built. The Egyptian desire to create a perfect, predictable calendar directly influenced the Julian and later the Gregorian reforms, the very calendar you use to plan your day. Their fundamental division of the day into 24 hours and the circle into 360 degrees are the invisible, ancient Egyptian scaffolding upon which all modern timekeeping and navigation are built. So the next time you glance at your watch or look up at the familiar pattern of Orion, remember that you are participating in a tradition that stretches back to the priests on the temple roofs of Thebes and Memphis. They were the first to dare to map the heavens, to seek order in the chaos of the night sky, and to weave their science and their gods into a single, magnificent tapestry. Their legacy is not stored away in a museum, it is alive in every second we measure, in every star chart we draw, and in our endless human quest to find our place in the universe. Their story proves that the desire to understand the stars is one of humanity's oldest and most enduring journeys. For centuries, the sophisticated astronomy of ancient Egypt was shrouded in mystery, its secrets locked away in cryptic hieroglyphs and the silent alignments of monumental ruins. The modern journey to reclaim this knowledge began not with telescopes, but with philologists painstakingly deciphering the Rosetta Stone. This linguistic key finally allowed scholars to read the celestial stories written on temple walls, coffin lids, and papyrus scrolls. They discovered that the Egyptians had left behind a sprawling library of astronomical data, from the detailed Decan lists in the tombs of the Valley of Kings to the complex theological charts of the Book of Nut. These texts revealed a system far more advanced than anyone had imagined, describing not just myths, but precise observations of stellar movements, planetary cycles, and timekeeping methods. This textual evidence provided the roadmap, but it was the dawn of modern archaeoastronomy that truly brought the ancient skywatchers' genius into focus. Pioneering researchers like the American astronomer Virginia Trimble and the Egyptian architect Alexander Badawi began applying rigorous scientific analysis to the old stones. By using astronomical software to reconstruct the night sky as it appeared millennia ago, they could test long-held theories. One of their most stunning confirmations involved the mysterious narrow shafts deep within the Great Pyramid of Giza. For years, they were thought to be air vents, but by calculating the exact angle of these shafts and comparing it to the position of key stars in 2500 BC, they proved the southern shaft targeted the star Al-Nitak in Orion's belt, the celestial form of Osiris, while the northern shaft pointed directly at Thuban, the North Star of the era. This was no coincidence. It was deliberate, precise architectural engineering designed to guide the pharaoh's soul. The temple complexes have offered further breathtaking validation. At Karnak, researchers used laser theodolites and GPS to confirm its main axis was aligned so that the rising sun on the winter solstice would shine directly down the corridor into the deepest sanctuary, illuminating the statue of the god. Even more impressively, at Abu Simbel, modern measurements have verified the exquisite precision of its alignment. The phenomenon where the sun illuminates the statues of Rameses and the gods deep inside the mountain on two specific days each year was not a lucky accident. It was the result of incredibly exact astronomical planning and sophisticated understanding of the solar cycle, a feat that still inspires awe in engineers and astronomers today. Perhaps the most compelling evidence for their accuracy comes from their calendar. By analyzing records of the heliacal rising of Sirius mentioned in ancient texts and comparing them to modern astronomical models, scholars have been able to date the reigns of pharaohs with remarkable precision, creating a reliable Egyptian chronology that underpins our understanding of the entire ancient Near East. This cross-referencing of celestial events with historical records proves the Egyptian priests were not just storytellers, they were meticulous data collectors whose observations spanned generations. Their recorded Sothic cycle, the 1,460-year period it takes for their civil calendar to realign with the stellar year, demonstrates a deep, long-term understanding of celestial mechanics. Today, the work continues with even more powerful tools. Satellite imagery and 3D laser scanning are mapping temple alignments across Egypt with sub-centimeter accuracy, revealing networks of sites that may have been used as a unified observational system. Archaeologists are now discovering star clocks and diagonal tables in previously overlooked tombs, adding new pieces to the puzzle. Each technological advance allows us to peer deeper into the minds of the ancient astronomers, confirming time and again that their celestial lore was a powerful fusion of spiritual belief and empirical science. We are not just discovering their past, we are reconstructing a lost science, one that commands our respect for its brilliance and its enduring legacy. Ultimately, the story of Egyptian star lore is a testament to one of humanity's most profound and enduring achievements, a seamless fusion of meticulous scientific observation and deep spiritual faith. This wasn't a culture that saw a conflict between the two. For them, the measurable, predictable movements of the stars were the most visible expression of the divine order they called Mad. Every decan that rose on schedule, every annual return of Sirius, Every predictable rotation of the bull's thigh was both a scientific fact and a theological confirmation that the gods were upholding their covenant with the world. Their priests were not just stargazers, they were the keepers of this cosmic balance, using simple, brilliant tools to track the heavens and ensure their rituals were in perfect harmony with the universe's rhythm. This celestial wisdom quite literally built a civilization. It dictated the agricultural cycle that fed millions, it provided the precise timing that organized their massive state projects and religious festivals, and it inspired the awe-inspiring alignments of their most magnificent monuments. The pyramids are not just tombs, they are frozen astronomy, their shafts targeting stars, their layout mirroring constellations, their very bases squared with the axis of the sky. The temples are not just houses of worship, they are stone clocks designed to capture moments of divine light, from the solstice sunrise at Karnak to the biannual miracle at Abu Simbel. Their entire conception of time, from the hour of the night to the year of the pharaoh's reign, was a gift from the stars. The legacy of this ancient wisdom is all around us, even if we've forgotten its source. Every time we divide a day into 24 hours or a circle into 360 degrees, we are using concepts refined on the banks of the Nile. Our modern calendar is a direct descendant of their solar year, a system so practical and effective that it was adopted and adapted by every major culture that followed. The Greeks, the Romans, and ultimately the entire world inherited this Egyptian understanding of the heavens, proving that their greatest export wasn't gold or grain, but knowledge, a way of seeing the universe that was both spiritually meaningful and scientifically powerful. So the next time you find yourself beneath a clear night sky, take a moment to really look up, trace the belt of Orion, and remember that long before he was a Greek hunter, he was Sa, the soul of Osiris, promising eternal life. Find the brilliant beacon of Sirius and think of it as Sopdet, the herald of the flood and the tears of the goddess Isis, and as you do, you'll be participating in a tradition that is thousands of years old, connecting you to the priests, astronomers, and philosophers who first dared to map the heavens and find their own place within the cosmos. Their story reminds us that the desire to understand the stars is one of the things that makes us human, a quest for meaning written in the light of the Imperishable Ones, forever burning in the silent darkness above.